from an undisclosed location in the Great Western Desert in the land of the free and autonomous Native American people. The 2024 presidential campaign in its time to return all US land back to their rights owners. This is the Ben Zion Podcast. Techno-communism.
Welcome back to the Ben Zion Podcast. I am your host, Ben Zion, and you're joining me in a hot bath because we are celebrating. I finished the first draft of my graphic novel, and so I'm going to do, like you may have seen in a pretty good Marxist film, Trumbo, about screenwriter Dalton Trumbo. I'm going to do the disgusting thing that I often do, which is eat and also work. I'm in the bathtub with electronics, food, just 3 feet away from the shitter. And you probably find that disgusting, but you're not here. So what are you going to do about it, you fuck? And I've made a delicious vegan dinner to celebrate. I made a vegan quesadilla smash burger, hot Italian sausage sandwich style, and some delicious curly fries with this vegan buffalo chicken flavored dip, and some garlic vegan aioli for the smash burger thingy, and some greens, and some delicious lemonade. And it's probably a little strange that I should say vegan over and over again, because it should be well understood I'm a vegan. But I don't mind, especially on this program, because I want to encourage you to be a little better. If you're not already considering the vegan lifestyle, you must consider it. I'd like to read some headlines for you. World's oceans suddenly spiked much hotter. What's happening? The world's oceans are dying right before our eyes. Climate apocalypse threatens the planet. From WRAL techwire.com, which was not a bad article. I don't know much about WRAL techwire, but that one wasn't really too bad. When I talk to Marxists about these problems of sustainability or veganism specifically, they were often saying, well, I'm fighting the revolution. I don't need to change my lifestyle. I'm fighting the revolution. Yeah, but there's not a million people camped out in front of Washington, D.C. stopping the evil empire from killing the planet right now. You're not doing that right now. I haven't seen you there. So until such time as that's actually happening, and you're not just blowing hot air on social media, maybe consider changing your lifestyle, because we, the people of the first world, are the beneficiaries of this horrible system that we've created, wherein the planet is killed. And we have to do things like fight against that, but also disregard the systems that are killing the planet, most notably with not using petroleum products or animal products. These are not made in a sustainable way. And in fact, every moment that we delay completely abolishing those two industries, the planet is closer to dying. Your children will not have a planet to live on. The ocean might be dead in a few years. You might already be dead, my friend. You might be the walking dead. But let's assume that there are things to be done still. And one of those things is for you to, first and foremost, take the revolutionary position. Number 2, change your lifestyle and to reflect the dismantling of those institutions as well. Because it's not, planet's not dying if millions of people are telling themselves that they were only a small part of the problem. And that's exactly what most of you are doing. I'm going to read a few other headlines. I mentioned the movie Trumbo. I have the table here. It has my some of this food and electronics on there. It's a little portable table, and kind of like what Trumbo used. I did not, during the making of Falcon X Omega Point, which I'm celebrating having finished a rough draft of, sit in the bath and use that table, or cut up a bunch of little pieces of. In the movie Trumbo, he cuts up little pieces of the script and moves them around in this little piece of wood while he's sitting in the bathtub. His kids are saying, none of that actually happens in my life. I didn't do that. I have been known to do something rather similar to that, work on this table in this bathtub. But I did not do that during the making of the Falcon X Omega Point graphic novel that I've been working on. All right, let's try this quesadilla. Just for the simple reason that I try not to do stuff like that too much. I don't want to damage my electronics. If I didn't have to worry about the electronics being damaged, I'd probably do it on a weekly basis. We'll start off with a story to do with kind of the first thing I mentioned here, a little bit in a roundabout way, which is story about food. and veganism and clean meats type products. Meat the End, an Israeli-based food startup engaged in making plant-based meat products, has unveiled the world's first texturized burger. So there's a famous, not super famous, but a well-known company in Israel called Aleph that makes things not unlike the Benzion burger. If you're at all familiar with Benzion podcast or Benzion lore, you know what that is. But the Aleph makes a lab-grown meat of a more ordinary kind for commercial production. This other company, based in Israel, we don't necessarily recommend buying things from Israel until such time as their apartheid system has ended. But if you say that about Israel, in my humble opinion, and you don't say in the same breath that about the client, their military client state, the United States, the server in that client-server relationship, then you are being pretty anti-Semitic. Because as bad as Israel is, they're not killing the planet in the way that the United States is. And a lot of people in the United States who are very critical of Israel don't necessarily hold that same microscope up to the United States. And that, I think, is kind of a CIA talking point and also a kind of low-grade anti-Semitism. Plant-based alternative meat is a major revolution in the food industry that aims to provide a source of protein to the global population without sourcing them from animals. Instead, it relies on a process called extrusion, which has been used for the production of products like cereals and puffed snacks, and uses it to process plant proteins into mimicking animal source meat. Conventionally, plant-based meat companies have relied on protein from soy and, more recently, peas to make the products. However, the chickpea, one of the earliest cultivated legumes and known to have high protein content, has now been found to be an ideal processing ingredient to mimic the texture of meat. So this is breaking news only in the sense that vegan meats are being improved upon almost on a weekly basis, and this is one step up from the Beyond Burger, which I hope you've tried. I like it. I'm eating this product right now. I can't remember if it's Beyond or its other major competitor, but there you go. I'm not going to read the rest of this article, but it's from Interesting Engineering. A food startup debuts world's first texturized plant-based meat burger, and I recommend that you check it out. Let's go into something to do a little more with computer science, and then I'll talk a little bit about Falcon X Omega Point and share some images from that. Let's see. Let's talk about AutoGPT. Some of you who watch this program, maybe you watch it for pretty broad strokes about the possibilities of where computer science and emerging technology are going. I'm an artist and commentator on these things. I've worked in some of these fields in a limited sense. I was a teacher to young people, teaching them programming and engineering, and I worked in a couple of startups along these lines, but not much of a coder really. And also the purpose of this program is not to really give you any real technical information. It's to maybe give you a vision of the future. And I hope that Falcon X Omega Point succeeds in that area a little bit, and it's not just a strange, surrealistic science fiction horror comic or something along those lines. So you've probably been watching this show or any number of other shows and heard about GPT quite a lot. And there are a couple of products that allow you to do more sophisticated things with GPT. They're kind of GPT plugins. One is called Baby AGI, standing for Incipient Artificial General Intelligence. The idea being we're close to recursion. And the other is called AutoGPT, Baby AGI and AutoGPT. AutoGPT may be the strongest AI tool that surpasses ChatGPT. This is from Bernard Marr. We've read his stuff before. Like many people, you may have your mind blown recently by the possibility of ChatGPT and other large language models like the new Bing or Google's Bard. For anyone who somehow hasn't come across them, which is probably unlikely as ChatGPT is reportedly the fastest growing app of all time, here's a quick recap. Large language models, or LLMs, are software-based algorithms trained on huge data sets, allowing them to understand and respond to human language in a very lifelike way. You should be using these things to revolutionary ends and to solidify your own position resource-wise to allow you to undertake revolutionary action. If you're not using these kind of tools, what do you do? The best-known example of ChatGPT, a chatbot interface powered by the GPT-4 LLM, which has taken the world by storm, ChatGPT, is able to converse like a human and generate everything from blog posts, letters, emails, to fiction, poetry, and even computer code. Yeah. If you're watching this closely and you want to know, maybe you've seen a little bit of Falcon X Omega Point already. I've only shared it with about 50 people or so. But all of the acronyms, which I made up in the story beforehand, but the acronyms themselves were written by ChatGPT. I said, write me an acronym for the word Athena that describes X, Y, and Z, and that's what they did. And I used ChatGPT quite extensively for things like this kind, mostly pre-writing. A lot of pre-writing I've done on this Falcon X before I started making the graphic novel. Because I didn't have much of a story to work with, I had the barest semblance of screenplay and some outlines that I'd written with my friend Cher Thomas and another guy who I don't like, who I'm not working with anymore, who we'll just call Fernando. Fernando was somebody who misrepresented themselves as kind of a fine, upstanding supporter of socialism. And when I came to know them better, I realized that they were an anti-communist, a crypto-fascist, like a lot of the people I've unfortunately tried to work with in my life. And I won't be working with Fernando anymore. That's not the only reason that we parted ways. It was a thing that sparked it off was a little more like eating food next to the toilet kind of thing. But there you go. But good riddance to that guy, either way. And I'll also do another shout out. That was not a shout out. That's not his real name, Fernando. But Cher, hi. I'll do another shout out to Trevor David, the actor who I originally wrote the role of David Chatlis for. And if you're watching this, I plan to share it with you, but I hope you'll get a chance to watch it. Not that you need to see me suggested nudity in a bathtub, but that's just what we're doing today. But Trevor David was the person that I originally wrote this for when I was thinking of trying to bundle a screenplay production with some folks that I know. And then I remembered that every time I've ever tried to do this, it's backfired horribly. And so I decided to make a graphic novel of it instead. Using the main tool that I used for this, not the only tool, I used about 50 tools, but one of the main tools that I used for this were AI art generators. Most notably, the one that I recommend to folks if you don't want to pay for this, and you have an Android phone, which is Wombo Dream, which oddly enough is the Wombo company, which made a few of these generative app products, was started by a guy whose first name is Ben Zion. So maybe that's part of the reason why I like to use this. But not really. I don't really care. If I could use open source versions of all of these things and not ever patronize any for-profit operation, I would. I think you know me well enough to know that. Well, anyway, ChatGPT has other products that you can use. AutoGPT, I watched a video of a guy using two AutoGPTs that he had set up, and they work together to write a computer program on their own. So ChatGPT is basically able to write its own computer programs, given a few guidelines, and the guidelines are just make a game, basically. And it made this little app. And it was able to kind of correct the mistakes of the other AutoGPT. So if you can't see the beginnings of AI recursion in this, well, there you go. But it seems to be heading in that direction. And certainly if you want to do things like maybe run your Instagram in such a way that you become an influencer, you can get this kind of plugin to do a lot of that work for you, because you're a busy person, you have other things you can be doing much better than being an Instagram influencer. So I recommend that you try and familiarize yourself with these products. I'm not going to read the rest of this article because fuck Forbes magazine. Fuck Forbes magazine. Fuck Forbes magazine. Here's another guy. Fuck this guy. This is from theeconomist.com. Definitely fuck them. They're just as bad as Forbes magazine. And definitely fuck this guy. You all know Harari. He's a crypto-fascist. He has kind of limited hangout kind of approach. He has a couple of somewhat unique ideas about technology. And all of that is to conceal the fact that he is just another capitalist pig. But let's read about him anyway. Harari argues that AI has hacked the operating system of human civilization. Storytelling computers will change the course of human history, says the historian and philosopher. Fears of artificial intelligence have haunted humanity since the very beginning of the computer age. Hitherto, these fears focused on machines using physical means to kill, enslave, or replace people. I don't think that's really the thrust of most of this fiction necessarily, but that is a recurring theme. But over the past couple of years, new AI tools have emerged that threaten the survival of human civilization from an unexpected direction. Again, when capitalists are talking about threats to civilization, that's code for the ruling elites who are killing the planet, should not be allowed to do that. The ruling elites losing their position of absolute power, near absolute power and influence. So you should support that. You should be supporting AI tools that could unseat these demonic figures killing the planet. AI has gained some remarkable abilities to manipulate and generate language, whether with words, sounds, or images. AI is therefore hack the operating system of our civilization. Seems to be the thesis of this piece. Language is the stuff almost all human culture is made of. Human rights, for example, are inscribed in our DNA. Aren't. Rather, they are cultural artifacts we created by telling stories and writing laws. Guides aren't physical realities either. Rather, they are cultural artifacts we created by inventing myths and writing scriptures. So The Economist magazine goes on to talk about Yuval Harari as a great guy, which he's not particularly great. Just like The Economist magazine is not particularly great. They are both representing the interests of the institutions that I mentioned, like petroleum, like livestock systems that are killing the planet, like many other for-profit concerns, should all be abolished and could all easily be abolished in this world where artificial general intelligence is now controlled by people, and all necessary institutions can be run through that. That's a world that we could easily build in the coming years, and that's why there's so much of the CIA talking points talking about how bad this is, because they do not want to see that capitalist system abandoned. They would rather die. They would literally rather subject you all to capitalism's climate apocalypse, which grows ever worse with each passing day. Every moment we do not do what I've just said, every moment we instead defer to pieces of shit like The Economist. So I was talking a moment ago about some friends that I've worked with. Cher Thomas, who's been a real inspiration to me as a Native American figure with revolutionary aims. And I mentioned the pseudonym Fernando, a person who also lives in my town. I'm not working with anymore. And I mentioned David, who lives in another city on the East Coast. And David, like Fernando, and like Cher Thomas, darker skinned folks than Ben Simon. And that bears mentioning because they have greater revolutionary potential as such. As you're hearing that correctly, if you're a darker skinned person, so long as there is a world wherein there is a de facto caste system all around the world enforced by the fascist West that brutalizes darker skinned people, so long as that continues to be the case, if you are a darker skinned person, you have greater revolutionary potential than lighter skinned people. And particularly in the United States, the heart of the anti-communist and ecocidal evil empire, if you are a black or native person, you are the person who has the moral authority, the legitimacy to stand up against that, which is why, unfortunately, for such people, the fascists will routinely kill folks like that. They make it look like an accident more times nowadays. You can rattle off a long list of African American Black Lives Matter protesters, people like this who have disappeared under pretty unusual circumstances. That's not normal. That's the action of fascists to a high degree. And just a few years ago, they would make it look like an accident as well. But it's well understood that that's what happened to an awful lot of Black Panthers. Black Panther organization is the one communist organization in history that had a real influence on the zeitgeist, had a real influence on American institutions, the most successful communist organization on this continent. And that's important because, as I said, this is the imperial core, and we need things that will stand up against these fascists who are killing the planet. And so I hope that's why the hero of Falcon X Omega Point really is this woman named Soraya Dar, who's African American or somebody who moved from Somalia as a young child. And honestly, in the first draft of the screenplay, she was a major supporting character, but not really the lead. But as I started making this comic, I was able to generate better images of her, better pictures of her than the other characters. So I started kind of giving her an upgrade. But that might have been something that would have happened in any event. So Falcon X Omega Point is a graphic novel that I made in a webcomic format. It's 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, so it's made for a screen like this one. It's not really made for the actual graphic novel format. I'm just calling it a graphic novel as using that shorthand. It is at present 190 pages, but that's not that long really, because some of these pages have just a few words on them, one big pretty picture or a couple of pictures and a couple of words. So it's even though 190 pages might seem like a lot, it would be less tiring than reading the average short novella written for a 9-year-old or something. Except for maybe if you find ideas related to science fiction, computer science, and revolutionary communism tiring, but that's another matter. The actual labor required to read it should not be that much, and that was my hope in reaching this audience, because these people who uphold this evil empire that's killing the planet, the United States and the fascist West, is mostly the kinds of people who read comic books. So my thinking was that I would make something to maybe speak to them in their own language, but maybe help them see what history really is and what history will soon become. If you're an adherent to the tech accelerationist and techno-communist worldview, I hope that you believe that there's a good chance that will happen. What happens in the story, I've described it very simply to most people as a group of programmers who build an AI that helps them take down the military-industrial complex. But it's a little bit more of a plot conceit, the taking down of the military-industrial complex, because what happens is conditions and public opinion are created such by this more advanced superintelligence that leads to the collapse of one very big military contractor, and then the superintelligence is able to arrange the cascading collapse of the rest of the military contractor sector, and all of the West, the United States and EU countries, etc., signing off on effectively what Japan did at the end of the Second World War, saying that they shall make war no more. The very kind of business like Raytheon, Boeing, and so forth, or for the most part Google and Facebook and so forth, which are all effective military contractors. All of this will be made illegal in this timeline. I would say a fictional scenario, but I'd like it to come to pass, so I'll describe it as a timeline. So that's a little bit about Falcon X Omega Point. The main villain seems a lot like Elon Musk, even though he works for a little bit of only slightly different company, Scientech, which is effectively Boeing. So it's referred to in the backstory and in passing as Cyan Aerospace, and then it becomes Scientech, a big company like Google. And what's the difference really between Boeing and Google? Not as much as you might think. And when you look at all of these organizations' role in this predatory system of U.S. militarism, if you really are honestly looking at those things, I hope you would understand that those are very bad things. And even though this story uses some violence and strong language, even sexually suggestive images, I don't like that sort of thing anymore. Sexually suggestive images and violence. I was a little apprehensive about making this, but as I said, I'm trying to reach out to U.S. fascist troops in the language that they would understand, and so that requires making a comic book. And I still might think about making this into film, but I really don't like working on that sort of thing. So someone else would take the reins, particularly a team of people of color. That would be the situation where I might be open to being involved in something like that. I'd imagine I sometimes watch Spanish language telenovelas, and there's been a certain number of articles written about how these telenovelas are in some ways as Eurocentric as almost any cultural property. They do not generally depict darker skinned people very much, and they even to this day will conform to this bizarre kind of thing that started to go out of fashion in the U.S., where a darker skinned person would be a servant, something like that. They use that trope, sadly, very, very often, if a darker skinned person appears in a telenovela at all. But nevertheless, I thought of telenovela producers because the story is mostly set in Los Angeles, and sometimes they will make telenovelas set in this part of the world. And also because a lot of telenovelas that I've seen, the CIA is the bad guy. And that's the case more or less in this story. So my thinking was that this project probably lent itself to being a film, though, rather than a series. Telenovelas are soap operas. But some of those companies do produce films for Netflix and now and so forth, Spanish language films. So I thought of a Spanish language film, maybe a little bit almost in the style of The Asylum, a company that makes these mockbusters, because they often have a lot of the money that's spent on them being digital effects budgets in these mockbusters. And so that would probably be the case for a story like this. The reason why I thought of it being made outside of the U.S. is because I don't trust really, even the most well-intentioned, even if somebody, my sort of dream director, Boots Riley, a Marxist who's made mainstream U.S. films, were to be attached to this, I still wouldn't necessarily trust that a genuinely anti-imperialist film would be made. Not because of Boots Riley, but because it's being made in the U.S., a fascist place. So my first instinct was to maybe try and chop this outside of the U.S. And that's, I think, a pretty safe instinct with a lot of things. The United States is kind of too far gone to do a lot. So if you really want to, I was talking to a friend of the show, who I sometimes refer to as Chuck. I'm going to call him out all the time. And I was talking to Chuck not too long ago, and Chuck says, I'm interested in the ideas that you put forward, Ben Zion, of Marxist tech accelerationism, techno-communism. And I'm particularly interested in seeing universal super longevity, using emerging technology to see that not just myself, but all of humankind will live preternaturally long lives. And I said, well, you live in a country that's not the U.S. You live in the city, Toronto. And Toronto does have a public health service. Canada has a public health service. Awful lot of people live in Toronto. You could be working on building a, I can share a link where I did a talk for another show about the idea of a policy consulting business where you try to prevail upon other countries to declare aging a treatable condition and use this emerging biomedicine, which I believe will be coming faster and faster, to better treat human beings. And that can't be done in the U.S. Because we don't even treat it. You can't have radical life extension in the U.S. because you don't even have ordinary life extension in the U.S. The average life expectancy in many countries is above 80 years because they have a public health service. The United States has no public health service, so the average life expectancy is much lower, some years lower. So you can't have that kind of good outcome in a fascist country, unfortunately. But in other countries, even countries that are well within the imperial core, as Canada is, you still might be able to work in this one area, public health service, in this one discipline, emerging biomedical discipline, which, if you're doing something else in biomedicine, maybe I would say bully for you, because radical life extension, a lot of these people are bullshit artists. I don't know how to roll out a radical life extension exactly. Chuck wants to work on something like that. So he said, work in your own countries, put together a team. But I don't think Chuck really wants to put together a team. Chuck kind of likes to shoot the breeze with people here and there. But I don't think Chuck is going to actually spearhead that project in Toronto. But maybe some of you in Toronto will see the wisdom of that and undertake that yourself.